Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on and finishing up How Much Does It Cost to Fall in Love by Useless Donut. And today's video is going to be chapters 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 3, Blonde Stress Relief Ball. Patrols were great. They were always a blessed distraction from the maelstrom inside Katsuki's head. But now he was back from his shift, exiting a punishingly hot shower and entirely unable to get a pair of freakish purple eyes out of his head. Katsuki did not care if Shinso was a hero or not. He didn't care about watching him waste away in some miserably cheerful cafe, or about the increasing darkness of the circles beneath his eyes, or the way he looked kind of haunted when he got lost in thought. Was life really that hard for him? He even asked Denki about it, but Denki just said that Shinso was doing what he wanted to do. It didn't make sense that the idiot would let his friend give up on being a hero. Denki had been one of Shinso's biggest supporters, even going so far as to zap Katsuki when he'd been shitting on Shinso for his subpar skills. Denki didn't speak to Katsuki for a week after that, actually. He only started acknowledging him again after Katsuki had begrudgingly offered to help Shinso with extra combat training. They'd really talked as little as possible, but it hadn't been that bad. They'd met up a few times a month to spar for most of their second year until Shinso was obviously proficient. So maybe Katsuki didn't like seeing all his hard work go to waste. In the privacy of his head, he could admit that Shinso had been damn good. Shinso wanted to be a hero more than anyone else, outside of himself and Deku. Katsuki had respected that. And he knew he should still respect part-time barista Shinso too, but what the fuck had happened? And was Katsuki really so terrible that Shinso wouldn't even tell him about it? Katsuki glared at his locker and tried not to be mad about it. It made sense that Shinso would be cagey at first, but he'd been talking to Shinso for months now. What could be so bad that he wouldn't tell Katsuki about it? He told him pretty much everything else, whether Katsuki wanted to hear about it or not. But whenever Katsuki brought it up, Shinso would brush it off, say there was no reason, but Katsuki knew it wasn't right. There was no way someone with that kind of drive could give up. Not much scared Katsuki, but he'd seen a little of his own determination in Shinso, and it was unnerving to see it vanish entirely.
"I'm out. Grabbing food,"
Katsuki announced, hoping it was vague enough Eijiro wouldn't have anything to say about it, but no such luck. His spiky red head snapped up, a grin spreading across his face. "Can I come? Can we get barbecue?"
"No,"
Katsuki huffed, pulling away already.
"I'm getting coffee."
Which was code for, "Don't fucking follow me." Eijiro's smile abruptly vanished. "You're not bothering Shinso again, are you?" Yeah, his friends had figured it out. Maybe Shinso had bitched to Denki or something, but no matter how it happened, it made Katsuki's life significantly worse. They all acted like Katsuki was some monster harassing a poor, defenseless Shinso. Shinso was anything but defenseless, and even if he wasn't a hero in training anymore, his tongue was still sharp enough to cut glass. His tongue. Katsuki shook himself, pushing the thought away in favor of glaring at Eijiro.
"I'm not bothering him,"
Katsuki snapped because he wasn't. At least, he thought he wasn't. Shinso honestly didn't seem to mind his presence, but then Denki always said he had the emotional intelligence of a shovel. "So you've given up on Project Harass Shinso into becoming a hero?" Eijiro says, folding his arms over his broad chest. Katsuki hefted his gear back over his shoulder and ignored him in favor of heading out the door. "Bro, don't be unmanly," Eijiro called after him. "Let him live his life." Katsuki didn't think he was being unmanly, and he also didn't feel like letting Shinso waste his life. He pulled the guest pass out of his pocket, turning it over in his hand, absently watching light glint off the plastic. A pass to his agency's gym, on the off chance he wanted to work out with Katsuki. train with Katsuki to be a hero. Not just hanging out at the gym, which would be pointless. Why would they hang out outside the cafe? Not that they hung out in the cafe, but Katsuki sighed and tried for the 100th time to imagine Shinso's reaction when he asked him. Maybe he'd gone a little too far. Denki had told him to cool it 1,000 times, but Katsuki figured if Shinso really wanted him gone, he could say so himself. He clearly had no qualms about talking shit to Katsuki's face after all. Katsuki hadn't managed to shake him even once. Maybe Katsuki found that a little refreshing after dealing with spineless extras all day. Maybe figuring out why the fuck Shinso wasn't a hero wasn't the only reason Katsuki found himself at Nocturne Cafe on a weekly basis. He opened the door, making the little bell chink above his head. Shinso looked up and pushed a chunk of purple hair out of his face. What a stupid hair color. But his exhausted look melted away to one of his smug smiles, and for some reason Katsuki was hit with a wave of relief.
What's it today?
Shinso said, and held up a stack of familiar-looking papers.
Your agency is probably running out of pamphlets now. Double shot espresso. Oh, look at you, Mr. Reasonable. That's not even much caffeine. Bag yourself a nice villain today.
Shinso's smile had acquired that specific curl that signified he was trying to rile Katsuki up. And true to form, irritation crawled under Katsuki's skin. But the feeling wasn't particularly unpleasant anymore.
Several,
Katsuki said because it was true.
But anyway, I figured you out.
Shinso's smile dropped away, replaced by the lethargic look that actually did annoy Katsuki.
I doubt that, Blasty.
Katsuki's hands curled into fists as he tried to force down his temper. He honestly did try to avoid hurting Shinso with his comments, and this was sensitive territory.
You had a lot of self-doubt back in UA. Did you get, stage fright or something? 'Cause I get it. It's a dangerous fucking career.
Katsuki took a deep breath and watched Shinso's eyes fill with wonder. Wonder at what exactly, Katsuki wasn't sure, but that was better than immediate dismissal.
So,
Katsuki went on,
work out with me. It'll be like training at UA. Maybe you'll feel good enough to try again after a bit.
Katsuki slapped a guest pass to his building on the counter. Shinso blinked at him, then turned away to make his order. Katsuki waited, quietly, for once, but still practically vibrating with tension. Shinso hadn't shut him down, and he couldn't wait to hear what he'd say. Had Katsuki actually figured it out? Shinso obviously wasn't a slouch. Even those baggy sweatshirts of his couldn't hide his broad shoulders, and, well, Katsuki was good at gauging people's strength, and Shinso must have kept up his strength training. He was nearly buzzing out of his skin by the time Shinso pushed his drink across the counter. Shinso gave him the strangest searching look, like he was the one trying to figure Katsuki out.
It's on the house,
Shinso said. Then he scratched at the back of his head in a rare sheepish expression.
I lost the pamphlet with your number on it, so here's mine.
Katsuki picked up the napkins Shinso pushed over with his number on it. Tiny sparks of nervousness fired up in his stomach. If he'd been right about Shinso, he must have had a hell of a lot of self-doubt if that stopped him from being a hero. Was Katsuki really qualified to take that on? And hell, he'd already agreed to it, so he'd better do a damn good job. Maybe he needed to pick up some books on how to be encouraging or how to not be a dick.
Text me when you want to work out,
Shinso said with this tiny smile. He looked nervous, or guilty, or something else vulnerable that Katsuki couldn't read. But his eyes said yes. Katsuki swallowed hard. There was something different about Shinso's expression, and Katsuki found he couldn't look away from those indigo eyes if it killed him.
You good?
Shinso's eyebrows were raised. Katsuki shook his head.
Don't be late,
he snapped, even though he hadn't even told Shinso a time yet. It was the spirit of the thing. He grabbed Shinso's number and fled the shop, forgetting his espresso entirely. Time passes. Hitoshi was perfectly aware he probably shouldn't be doing this, but training with Bakugou was too damn fun. They'd just finished an hour of sparring and Hitoshi was dripping sweat. Bakugou was glowing. He got this look like the sun lived beneath his skin, and everything he did was blinding, and still Hitoshi couldn't look away. It was hard at first. Hitoshi had spouted off some bullshit about having kept up with his training despite being a barista and having no particular use for it, and Bakugou had just taken it in stride. He'd made a schedule for Hitoshi's training, and Hitoshi felt weirdly guilty about it. Still, they'd been training together for over a month, and Hitoshi knew it was good for him. Fighting Bakugou was improving his hand-to-hand, and he always left the gym feeling clear-headed and optimistic. Those were pretty uncommon emotions for Hitoshi, and he treasured them. Somehow, between the training and Bakugou's still consistent trips to the coffee shop, Hitoshi ended up seeing him at least twice a week. It was weird to realize they were actually friends. Whether it was across a cafe counter or after a round of sweaty sparring, their conversations had become easy, comfortable. Still laced with insults and jabs, but Hitoshi had long realized Bakugou wasn't putting any bite behind it. It was fun. It was a good distraction from the consistent horrors of Hitoshi's work, too. So Hitoshi told him everything about his life that he could. The broken AC unit in his building, the annoying customers at work, his attempts to make some kind of urban garden on his balcony, the various stray cats he'd befriended around the city. In return, he heard about the stress of Bakugou's life. How hard he'd worked to be acknowledged, how he was eternally put upon to host all of his friends' celebrations, and how he didn't even hate it that much. He thought Bakugou might lose interest, but the opposite was happening. Bakugou had seemed absolutely giddy to learn Hitoshi was an absolute crap at fighting, and while Hitoshi had tried to hold back at first, he just couldn't. Bakugou was too good, and Shinso relished a good fight. He had plenty of training partners at his agency, and while they were excellent heroes, no one really fights like Bakugou Katsuki.
Not bad, loser,
Bakugou crowed, utterly destroying Hitoshi's train of thought. Hitoshi's eyes followed the lines of his muscles as he stretched upwards first, then folded in half to grab his feet. The motion pulled his shorts tight across his ass, and Hitoshi suddenly couldn't look anywhere else. Was that on purpose? With a sinful groan, Bakugou straightened up, rolled his shoulders, then dropped down next to Hitoshi. He could smell the vague sweat, acrid scent of his quirk, and damn, Hitoshi was starting to really like it.
It was a good one,
Hitoshi agreed. He stretched luxuriously, feeling the knots in his back pop.
I love a good fight.
Bakugou's eyes narrowed.
Do you now?
Something about that low voice was exciting things that really wouldn't be disguised by Hitoshi's track pants. He pulled his knees up to his chest and side-eyed Bakugou.
Sure,
Hitoshi said.
Nothing else really feels the same, you know. You're like a blonde, fluffy stress relief ball. The stress of working a couple hours a week at the coffee shop,
Bakugou said skeptically. Hitoshi shrugged.
I'm just doing my thing.
I know you're stressed.
Wow, look, another thing you don't need to care about.
It was a little too harsh, and Hitoshi regretted the way Bakugou's face immediately clouded.
I just don't get why.
Bakugou growled. This was quickly heading to dangerous waters. Hitoshi stood suddenly, putting some distance between them. He couldn't tell Bakugou that he had stressed because he'd been held at gunpoint a few days earlier while villains tried to figure out exactly how his quirk worked. Hitoshi had barely made it out alive. It hadn't been a good night. Hitoshi hadn't slept in at least 2 days because of it, and was hoping that working out with Bakugou would clear his head enough to get him to pass out once he was home. It often worked like that. He'd needed this today, but he wasn't sure that he liked Bakugou picking up on it.
Don't worry your pretty little head about it,
Hitoshi said, waving a careless hand. He'd headed for his gym bag, hoping Bakugou would drop it. If only Bakugou ever dropped anything. Suddenly, a too warm hand grabbed his arm and spun him around.
No, cut the shit.
Bakugou snapped, his eyes narrowed in irritation? Frustration?
I'm not.
Don't!
Bakugou shouted.
Fuck. Shinso, you're good. You're better than half the heroes I know. Why the hell did you give up? What the hell is bothering you?
Hitoshi stumbled back, blown away by the sheer passion in the words. He felt sick to his stomach. He'd been deceiving Bakugou, using him like some kind of stress relief when, holy shit, when Bakugou actually cared about him. Hitoshi had no idea when that started, but he sure as hell had fucked it up now.
I can't tell you.
Hitoshi stuttered. Bakugou looked angry, but Hitoshi knew him well enough by now to look past the fury and see what lay beneath it. Bakugou was frustrated and hurt. He could see it in the clench of his fist, the tightness of his jaw. And then it got worse, because Bakugou stepped forward and dropped a heavy hand on his shoulder.
Look, Shinso, you can tell me. I'm not gonna be a bitch about it.
It's nothing,
Hitoshi said, the words thick and bitter in his mouth. He hated lying to Bakugou, but a mountain of paperwork gave him no other option, because Bakugou was right. Hitoshi had wanted to become a hero more than anything, and that meant there was nothing that would persuade him to break the agreements he'd made with his agency, not even Bakugou being disconcertingly sincere. But that was small comfort when he watched the way Bakugou's shoulders hunched inwards, his hands going to his pockets.
I know I'm not the easiest person to be around,
Bakugou said roughly.
But you can trust me. I'm not gonna make fun of you or whatever.
He was close, closer than before, and Hitoshi suddenly realized they were nearly chest to chest, and he really, really wanted to kiss him. Hitoshi wasn't able to look away from his mouth, the slight frown playing across it. When he finally looked up, Bakugou was staring him straight on. Hitoshi felt the eye contact like a punch to the gut. There was really no mistaking it now. The tension that always ran between them was running hot, sticky with desire, and Bakugou's lips were so close. Bakugou's eyes dropped to Hitoshi's mouth, lingering for a breathtaking moment before snapping back up.
Do it,
Bakugou challenged him, his voice rough and heated.
Kiss me.
So that's how it was then. Hitoshi was drowning in guilt and in Bakugou's eyes, because there was no way Hitoshi wasn't going to kiss him, but damn, he really shouldn't. Hitoshi wanted him to flinch away, for the inevitable sign that Bakugou didn't want this. It didn't come. And then his lips were brushing against Bakugou's, hesitant and longing. Bakugou made this small, satisfied sound that was completely irresistible. Hitoshi felt Bakugou's hands on his hips, tugging them closer together. Hitoshi loved the way Bakugou fit against his chest, how Bakugou kissed him back hard, arrogant and demanding, like he was in every other part of his life. He tasted like sweat and sweetness, and Hitoshi would have gladly kissed him for the rest of the night if Bakugou hadn't pulled away.
Well,
Bakugou said hoarsely.
There you go.
Bakugou.
Shinso was speechless. Bakugou frowned up at him.
I don't hate you.
Bakugou huffed, crossing his arms in a way that made his muscles bulge. Hitoshi tried not to stare, and ended up staring anyway. Bakugou went on, his tone determined.
Being around you doesn't suck.
Oh, Bakugou was explaining his feelings in a very Bakugou way. When had that stopped being annoying and started being cute?
High praise from a top hero,
Hitoshi murmured. He wanted to reach out and pull Bakugou back against him, but something about him seemed untouchable in that moment.
Yeah, that's right. Are you ever gonna tell me what's going on with you? Look, you don't want to be a hero? Fine, just tell me what happened. I won't judge.
Bakugo looked a little guilty for a moment before adding on,
I won't judge too much. I'll try not to.
Whatever lightheaded wonder Hitoshi had been feeling after the kiss shattered, replaced by a frozen pool of dread, because he couldn't do this. He couldn't start something with Bakugo built on lies, and he couldn't betray his own agreements with his agency.
Bakugo, I swear, if it was something I could tell you, I would. But I can't.
Bakugo's relatively open expression snapped shut.
Oh, fuck this,
he snarled. Hitoshi tried not to be gutted by the hurt that flashed over Bakugo's face.
Wait,
Shinso said, but Bakugo was already turning away. He caught him with a hand on his shoulder, unsure of what he was going to say, even as he opened his mouth.
Look, give me some time.
To talk to his superiors and bully them into letting him add another person to his need-to-know list?
It's been months,
Bakugo snapped. Hitoshi drew up short. Had it been already? Bakugo's mouth twisted.
Don't worry about it. I don't know what I was thinking, actually fucking trying for once. Just forget it. Sorry I bothered you. I'll get out of your fucking ridiculous hair.
Bakugo sure could move fast when he wanted to, because as soon as he'd spat out those bitter words, he was storming across the gym to grab his things, and then he was gone. Hitoshi was faced with the insane reality that Bakugo must actually have liked him, and that he probably didn't anymore. Chapter 4. Surprised? Absolutely not. Hitoshi scowled at his boss.
Come on, you're always saying I should date.
Explain it to me again why some guy you kissed once deserved classified life or death information. Ferrero clicked her pincers at him, obviously annoyed. Hitoshi made himself ignore the travesty that was referring to Bakugou Katsuki as some guy, and focusing on making a convincing case to his boss. Hitoshi had, after all, already pushed the limits of his need-to-knows. Midoriya knew because he was too nosy not to, and Denki because the guy threw a very electric temper tantrum when Hitoshi tried to feed him the agency-approved verbiage about how he was giving up on a hero career. Maybe it would have been more convincing if he didn't have such a mediocre cover job. But honestly, he did a lot of field work. He really couldn't keep up appearances as anything that required much of a presence.
That's a little dramatic.
Hitoshi eyed her, folding his arms. It wasn't life or death anyway.
Bakugo already knows my quirk. The only difference is he'd know what capacity I'm using it in.
You know, these permissions are usually reserved for spouses and parents, and with you especially, the more people who know about what you're doing, the less effective you are, and we need you at your most effective.
Ferrero, come on.
No, put a ring on it and maybe I'll reconsider. Hitoshi left the room before he could say something he regretted, pissed beyond all belief. Not a lot of things made him mad, but he was Bakugo levels of raging. He shut himself in the bathroom and glared at the wall. Fuck. She'd essentially just told him to marry Bakugo. That alone was an insane thought, and would literally never happen as long as Bakugo was suspicious of him. And that's ignoring Hitoshi's own reluctance to start a relationship with anything less than complete honesty. It would be one thing if Bakugo never asked about it, but he had to actively lie to his face to keep the truth to himself, and he really, really hated it. Izuku had warned him that Bakugo was perceptive, but Hitoshi hadn't realized that that perception would be deployed alongside a pathological need to know other people's business. There was no way he'd let it rest as long as he was spending time with Hitoshi, which he definitely wasn't, not anymore. And it really fucking sucked to realize how boring and lonely his shifts had become without Bakugo dropping in to say hello. He should have realized how much it meant while he still had it. Fuck. Well, there was only one other way to get around this. He pulled up a list of their ongoing cases and tried to figure out how to manipulate things, so working with someone with an explosion quirk was inevitable. Time passes. Avoiding Nocturne Cafe had become a pain in the ass. Katsuki kept forgetting to grab coffee near his house because the habit of stopping by to see Shinso was so damn strong. His traitor feet kept carrying him past the damn cafe with its damn yellow flowers, the alluring smell of coffee wafting out the front door. Sometimes he'd see Shinso inside, chatting up a customer, making coffee, occasionally gossiping with coworkers. Bakugou wanted to go back inside. Bakugou wanted to kiss him again. He felt the urge tugging at his feet. It would be so easy, and all he had to do was ignore Shinso's apparent abandonment of his hopes and dreams, and then it would be fine. Whatever awkwardness existed between them now was all Katsuki's fault. He'd already been lectured about it by both Denki and Eijiro. Apparently, Katsuki should take Shinso at face value and accept him as he is, and trust him to say something if it was important. Sometimes that was almost enough to get him through the door. Then Katsuki remembered the look on Shinso's face when Aizawa had announced he was getting into the hero course. Katsuki knew that look because he'd seen it before on his own face when he'd gotten his acceptance letter to UA. He had opened it alone because he couldn't bear for anyone to witness the emotions it brought up in him. He'd been a brat in middle school, but he'd still cried over that letter. So yeah, Shinso was great, in theory. Katsuki was into his sarcasm, his irreverence, his suspiciously good hand-to-hand combat skills, his slow smiles, the way he scratched the back of his neck when he felt self-conscious or amused, the way he seemed to kick Katsuki right out of even his worst moods. Katsuki didn't know when exactly he'd started to like the asshole so much. Maybe it was on one of those days where the frustration of some perceived failure had him crawling out of his skin, and he'd stormed into Nocturne Cafe, and Shinso had somehow still managed to make him laugh his stupid head off. Or maybe it was later, when Shinso had pinned him during a sparring match for the first time, and victory made those purple eyes light up like the fucking northern lights. Or maybe it had just been the first time Katsuki had walked into the cafe and Shinso had called him a dick and smiled while saying it. But Katsuki was all about passion, and where the fuck had Shinso's gone? Damn it, Katsuki was actually far gone enough to consider if Shinso was actually passionate about what he was doing. Maybe if he was, Katsuki could understand it. But Shinso couldn't be. Not with the odd hours he worked. If he cared about being a barista for whatever reason, he'd be working there more than a handful of hours a week. Katsuki couldn't figure it out, and Shinso had made it clear that he wasn't going to explain anything. So it was fine. Katsuki wasn't about to fuck around with someone who didn't give a shit about their own life, or didn't give enough of a shit about Katsuki to explain it to him. He would just ignore how it hurt until he didn't feel anything anymore. He didn't care. He didn't care that Shinso wasn't a part of his life anymore. He obviously didn't need him, not when he could get free, disgusting coffee from the machine in his agency's break room. He was currently nursing a scalding cup of it when his superior dropped a folder in front of him. "You ever hear about dematerializer?"
Yeah. Like Shigaraki Light, right? Shreds up whatever she touches.
"Super dangerous. We're bringing on a specialist from an underground agency. We can't risk any of our people getting close, and this guy has a 100% catch rate."
No one has 100% catch rate.
Even Katsuki's stats hovered around 70%. What with villains fleeing the scene, apparently some people really don't want to get exploded. Who'd have thought? Well, they're relatively new to the scene, so their stats are probably a little skewed, but they are very, very good. Basically the government's pet at this point, really. They pamper their agents so much.
Yeah.
Katsuki waved a hand.
So what's the deal?
You're going to have to sign off on a lot of NDAs to even talk with the agent.
Sounds like a bitch.
By all accounts, they are, his boss chuckled. But worth the attitude, apparently. Perhaps parallels could be drawn to someone else, he added with a pointed look at Katsuki. Katsuki flipped him off with both hands just to prove a point. Katsuki's attitude problems were well known. Katsuki dealt with it by both keeping the worst of his temper under control and also being so damn good that no one could afford to turn him away.
All right, I'm in.
Hand me the paperwork when you're done. You'll be meeting the agent off-site at a predetermined location. Katsuki mumbled something about self-important underground agencies and pain in the asses, but got to work. This was a great chance to prove himself. Katsuki could do a lot of things, but he was never assigned to things that required nuance. He wanted to prove he'd learned the self-control to handle delicate cases, and Dematerializer was pretty damn delicate. Still, was all of this necessary? Literally hours of paperwork and then another hour-long interview with a faceless screen in a nondescript office building? At least as a pro-hero, Katsuki didn't need any additional background checks. Who the hell was this guy? As part of the collaboration, Katsuki was joining a strike team from whatever underground agency they were working with. His agency would be taking the public credit and a third of the monetary payout, so Katsuki found himself in civvies, gear bag over his shoulder, and saying some spy shit password to the receptionist in an entirely different, nondescript office building from where he was interviewed. His elevator went to an unmarked floor, and he walked into a bland hallway. A young woman with straight black hair waved him in. "This is our agency's neutral meeting space," she said. Her voice was pleasant and soft, and it instantly got on Katsuki's nerves. "You were scanned for hostile devices in the elevator. This shouldn't interfere with your gear, but you should check for function before entering the field regardless." She set off down the hallway, Katsuki sputtering behind her.
You what? Me?
No one fucks with his gear. "You'll be meeting the control hero Subjugate," she said, ignoring his question. "He's waiting for you in room 712. He has the mission rundown. You will be on an anonymous conference call with the rest of the remote team within the half hour."
What?
She waved the door in front of them. 712 sat next to the door frame in shiny sans serif. Katsuki blinked, feeling a bit like he'd been fired out of a cannon with no idea where he was heading. "A word of advice?" The girl smiled at him and blinked coquettishly. "Try not to talk back to him." Fucking weird-ass place. He was gonna sue the shit out of his agency if this freaky James Bond place had killed him or something. He opened the door, stepped in, and looked around the room. A man sat with his back to him. For a split second, Katsuki thought it was Aizawa. The black combat armor, topped with a black capture weapon and a mess of purple hair tied into a bun. Katsuki's stomach swooped. The man turned, twisting around in the chair to rest one muscled arm over the back of his chair. Katsuki had seen that lazy grin in his dreams. Hitoshi Shinso. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly.
"It was pretty hard to get us on a case together, you know."
Shinso drawled out. He looked smug. Katsuki was instantly and completely overwhelmed. He turned around and tried to leave, only to learn the door had locked behind him. He spun back around, snarling. Flight had failed, so fight it was.
The fuck?
Surprised?
Shinso looked a little less smug now, and a lot more nervous. Good. He should be nervous. Hurt was adding fuel to Katsuki's rage, turning it from manageable to unstoppable.
What the hell, Shinso?
Katsuki shouted, pounding one palm into the table.
You were a hero the whole damn time?
Yeah.
Shinso's grin was back. The bastard was proud of it, too. Katsuki's mind unhelpfully played through the countless ways he'd humiliated himself, trying to figure Shinso out, trying to encourage him, to support him. Katsuki's face burned with shame.
I hope you're fucking happy. Did you have a good fucking time?
Shinso stared at him, purple eyes wide and shocked. Katsuki went on before the asshole could get out another word.
Did you like laughing at me? Did you like laughing with your friends about how stupid I looked, huh? Was it funny? You like seeing me fucking embarrass myself over and over while you were a fucking hero this whole goddamn time?
Shit, Katsuki couldn't deal with this. He tried the door again, slamming his fist against it in desperation.
Fuck!
He shouted, punctuating the word with another fist against the door. Shit, was he going to start crying? Katsuki never handled feeling weak well, and humiliation was even worse.
Fuck. I gotta get out of here.
Bakugou, let me explain.
Shinso's voice was calm in a way that was probably trained, because he was a pro hero. Shit. Katsuki's hands clenched against the door. He refused to turn around. He wasn't going to show Shinso that wretched look on his face. Damn it, Katsuki never got this way about people. And the one time he tried to take a chance on someone, he was someone's fucking joke? A punchline for Shinso to laugh at? Was that bitch in the hallway in on it too? Was everyone?
Bakugou, I wanted to tell you. I promise. You were right the whole time, okay? There's nothing I wanted more than to be a hero. And there's no way I was going to break my NDAs, not even for the hot blonde turning up at my cover job.
Hot blonde? Cover job? He tried to fit everything together in his head, to reconcile his past image of Shinso as a failed hero wannabe with the obvious successful underground hero who he was trying to keep his identity undercover. A lot of things made a lot more sense now. Katsuki scrubbed his eyes briefly and turned around. Shinso had stood up and had one hand outstretched towards Katsuki. Katsuki's heart lurched at their closeness. Had Katsuki really missed him this much? He couldn't stop running his gaze over Shinso's face. He looked good. Right. Like he belonged in this outfit. Like he'd fought in it countless times. He probably had. Shinso's eyes were soft, though, and sympathetic. A look Katsuki rarely saw on him, and he wasn't sure he liked it.
Look, they wouldn't let me give you the NDAs just for dating,
Shinso pleaded.
I swear, I wanted to tell you.
Dating?
Not that you would want to date me, but anyway, they said that was for spouses only, and I was already over my quota on who needs to know anyway.
What?
Katsuki was not following. He was stuck on the word dating, or maybe the word spouses? Shinso had kissed him once, and yeah, it sort of melted his brain, but he still hadn't even begun to imagine Shinso would want a relationship with him. Most people wanted to bang Katsuki right up until his personality drove them away. Katsuki was confused, and he hated how confusion felt.
Look, Bakugou,
Still.
Katsuki snapped, defaulting to the comfort of anger.
Doesn't mean you weren't fucking laughing at me the whole time. I'm not a damn punchline, Shinso.
It was kind of funny at first,
Shinso admitted, biting his lip briefly. Katsuki opened his mouth, but Shinso cut him off.
But it stopped being funny real quick, okay? Fuck. I really liked you coming around. I wanted to tell you the truth.
Well, you sure as shit didn't.
Katsuki snarled, even if the worst of his anger was already bleeding away. Shinso took a tentative step forward.
I can now, though, okay?
It's just fucking embarrassing.
Katsuki's shoulders were hunching in, and he looked away. This was humiliating. He wanted out. Fuck Dematerializer. He didn't need this.
Wish I never tried to figure you out,
he mumbled. He couldn't quite bring himself to look up from the ground.
Don't say that,
Shinso said quietly, stepping in closer.
Hey, there's not a hell of a lot of people who have believed in me. Aizawa was the first, and then only after I busted my underprepared ass in the sports festival. And after that, I can still count the rest of the people who've truly cared about my success on one hand, okay?
So
it means the world to me that you cared, Shinso said. Katsuki swallowed hard. This was a lot of vulnerability, and it was making him feel things. Too many things. He wanted to knock a hole in the door and storm far, far away. Maybe a couple countries away, but he also needed to hear what else Shinso had to say. Shinso met his eyes. I was really touched, okay? It meant a lot. I hated that it was on false pretenses, but it still mattered to me. I hope you still... He trailed off. When Katsuki looked up again, Shinso was close. Last time he'd been this close, he'd kissed Katsuki. Would he do it again?
Still what?
Katsuki rasped out, his throat sore from holding his emotions in.
Still care about me. I don't know.
Shinso mumbled. Katsuki swallowed hard. He'd noticed the 5 o'clock shadow on Shinso's jaw, the deep bruises pooling beneath his eyes. He looked exhausted, even for Shinso.
I guess.
Katsuki choked the words out before he could think better of it. Shinso's eyes lit up, sparkling like a night full of stars.
You guess? What do you guess, Bakugou?
Don't play fucking coy.
Katsuki snapped, crossing his arms. As far as he was concerned, he's as good as confessed already.
Kiss me again, or don't. I don't care.
I care,
Shinso immediately said, and took Katsuki's face in his hands, stepping in until they were chest to chest. He smelled like coffee and gunpowder, and Katsuki suddenly wondered what kind of cases he'd been working on.
That's why you were still so good at combat.
Katsuki muttered, tilting his chin up. Shinso looked down at him, lashes lowered.
I was holding back, baby. Didn't want to tip you off.
Katsuki refrained from lashing out at the nickname, but only because he really liked Shinso's big hands on his face and didn't want to do anything to change the love-drunk expression on Shinso's face.
Next time, you better bring it,
Katsuki whispered. Their lips were nearly touching.
No holding back.
Next time.
Shinso's words were nearly inaudible.
Unless you're too fucking chicken shit.
The words were cut off by Shinso's mouth on his. Shinso made this small, happy mewling sound that had Katsuki losing his mind, grabbing Shinso to pull him in and kiss him back harder. Why did he have to like this sarcastic fucker so much? Soon they were crashing against the table, Katsuki grabbing under Shinso's thighs to lift him onto the table. Fucker was heavy. But this way, Katsuki could lean into his chest and lose himself in the way Shinso's hands were twisting in his hair, in the way his legs locked behind Katsuki's waist. Shinso kissed him for a few moments more before pulling away. He looked unbearably smug, a shark smile spreading across his face. Katsuki hadn't quite seen Shinso look so vicious or victorious before, but he really, really liked it. He wanted to devour him whole.
We better stop before someone joins the call,
Shinso said. His voice was low and husky. Katsuki stared up at him, completely enthralled. He didn't particularly care who saw them, but if Shinso did...
If you say so.
Shinso snorted softly, but pushed Katsuki away to hop off the table and slid into the chair, just in time, as a soft ping alerted them that someone was joining the chat. Katsuki sat down next to Shinso, next to Pro Hero Subjugate, who had apparently had 100% capture rate. What else didn't he know about Shinso? He couldn't wait to find out. Chapter 5. All for a Boy. Hitoshi's phone rang. His work phone. With a groan, he stretched over the end of the couch to grab it off the end table. Katsuki grumbled against his chest, protesting the shift in movement. Shinso pressed a quick kiss to his boyfriend's ridiculously spiky hair in apology before picking up the phone. He knew it was Ferrero immediately by the hissing sound of breath between her mandibles. Subjugate, are you in a safe space to talk? Hitoshi looked down at Katsuki, all sleepy and soft, draped on top of him. They'd been watching some B-list horror movie, and Katsuki had had a long day. And technically, he had already signed every NDA the agency had. Giving the all clear over the phone line should technically mean Hitoshi was alone, but Hitoshi wouldn't ask Katsuki to move off him for the world.
Yup,
He said instead, a lie, but a worthy one. There was a long, suffering sigh on the other end of the line. Shinso, you know there's security cameras in all our meeting rooms, right? It took Hitoshi a couple of seconds to remember which of his questionable actions in meeting rooms she was referring to. Hitoshi had wondered how long it would take her to notice. Apparently, the answer was a month or so. He'd thought it would be shorter, but then maybe she'd actually wanted to give him and Katsuki some space before getting up in his business.
Oops,
Hitoshi said. Katsuki looked up, his brow furrowed in that annoyed, cute look he gets. Hitoshi switched on speakerphone and held up a finger to his lips. Not oops, Shinso. Care to explain why you were sucking face with Ground Zero?
He's got a pretty face.
Katsuki's mouth quirked into a smile. Hitoshi smiled back, unable to care about being chewed out by his boss when Katsuki's eyes were on him. It made him feel invincible. Be that as it may, I just have to ask.
Do you really have to ask?
Shinso, please. Did you actually convince our assignments division to work with Ground Zero's agency so he'd sign the paperwork to see you?
Sure did.
Hitoshi met Katsuki's eyes glowing red with amusement despite the dim light. Ferrero went on, irritation making her clacking voice sharper. And figure out your damn underground identity because he knows you on sight. Specifically because I didn't let you tell him your underground status for a kiss?
That does sound ridiculous,
Hitoshi said mildly. Katsuki muffled a snort against Hitoshi's chest. Shinso. Ferrero's voice was sharp with reproach.
Yes, that's exactly what I did.
Hitoshi sighed.
And we did a damn good job on Dematerializer, so I don't want to hear about it.
Shinso, this is technically not a breach of contract, but it is underhanded.
Ah, being underhanded. I'm good at that, aren't I?
Don't try to pull this shit again, or you're out, Ferrero snapped. Katsuki looked up alarmed. Shinso wrinkled his nose.
Actually, you should be happy I found a workaround that suits us both. We both know I'm one of your best agents, and we're hard up for fresh blood. You can't replace me, and you're not going to. I'm happy to work my ass off and risk my life, but if I feel the need to be truthful with one guy in order to get in his pants, I'm going to damn well do it.
There was a long, tense moment. Katsuki's hand was bunched in Hitoshi's shirt, and Hitoshi really hoped he wouldn't find burn marks on it later. Katsuki's control was usually stellar, but Hitoshi had learned his boyfriend had a protective streak a mile wide. Finally, a sigh came over the line. Fine, you're right. I've been hard on you. I know. I just want you to be careful, Shinso. I've seen people get burned by things like this before.
I'm pretty sure I'm safe with one of the country's top heroes,
Hitoshi said dryly, one hand wandering down to play with Katsuki's hair. Katsuki pushed his head into the touch like a cat, and Hitoshi was suddenly awash in fondness. He didn't care what everyone said. Bakugou Katsuki was cute as hell, Ferrero snorted. Not sure about that, but just make sure you really like this guy before you spill all your secrets, okay? You better be in this for the long haul.
I am,
Hitoshi said softly and hung up on her.
For the long haul, huh?
Katsuki grinned, propping himself up on his elbows. Insufferable. Hitoshi loved every inch of him.
Come on, you know I'm fucking soft on you.
Hitoshi huffed. Katsuki looked even smugger, if such a thing were physically possible. Sure, it had only been a month or so since they'd cleared things up, but as soon as Katsuki knew the truth, well, it had turned out they'd both been holding back, and they were damn near inseparable now. Hitoshi had sort of thought Katsuki would be difficult to date, but the opposite was true. Katsuki was irritating and loud, like always, but also straightforward, affectionate, and loyal to a fault. Hitoshi found the arrogance was a lot easier to handle when Katsuki's vulnerabilities were whispered against his chest in the dead of night. It didn't hurt that Katsuki dragged him out of his damn apartment on a regular basis, and when Hitoshi was reeling from a particularly horrible job, he never doubted that Katsuki could handle hearing about it.
Kinda hot hearing you talk back to your shitty boss,
Katsuki said finally, his eyes dropping to Hitoshi's mouth.
I like that you've got a mouth on you.
Hitoshi felt heated interest sparking in his gut, and the way Katsuki was pushing down against him couldn't be accidental. Hitoshi cleared his throat.
Wanna see what else this mouth can do?
Yeah,
Katsuki rasped, then paused to look Hitoshi in the eyes.
but just so you know, I'm in it for the long haul too.
All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this one. I really like this one. It was a really nice Bakushin. It was like really interesting too. Like Hitoshi being like a super secret undercover hero. I really liked that. And like Baku's just so cute in this. Like he's so soft. He like, but like not soft. He like really wants Hitoshi to like not give up on his dreams, even though he really hadn't given up on his dreams. I just really liked that. It was so fun. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. I hope that you guys liked another Bakushin. Because the more I read them, the more I enjoy them. And yeah, I hope you liked everything about this one. The original fic is linked in the description. I will be doing another fic by Useless Donut later this year, and it's actually a Bakudeku. So stay tuned for that if you are a Bakudeku fan or you're just a fan of Useless Donut's writing. Stay tuned for those things. If you come back and join me for another video, then I'll see you next time.